None of the information in this video should be considered financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. I have a bias towards the XX network because they are sponsors of this show. Those who become drunk with power and have enriched themselves unlawfully while serving will continue the same path while they remain in power.
No matter whether they have 5 eyes or 10 eyes, as long as they dare to harm China's sovereignty, security, or development interests, they should be careful not to get their eyes poked out.
The Five Eyes is an international intelligence cooperation initiative between 5 nations.
The spying agency of the UK, GCHQ, the spying agency of the US, the NSA, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada have instead been acting as one, as a single force, intercepting all of our private communications and sharing them with each other by default.
Intelligence agencies are saving records of everything that occurs on the web. All data traveling through fiber optic lines are being stored.
Edward Snowden revealed another program called PRISM, which the NSA says is authorized under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA. PRISM is the program the NSA uses to target the internet communications of terrorists. It has the capability to capture emails, chats, video, and photos. But privacy experts believe the NSA's dragnet for terrorists on the internet may also be sweeping up information on a lot of Americans.
No, that's not true. Under FISA, NSA can only target the communications of a U.S. person with a probable cause finding under a specific court order.
The agencies maintain that they are only doing this to capture criminals. The NSA, for instance, will tell you that they never spy on citizens unless there's a warrant. However, there is some truth to this fact. The fact is the Five Eyes allows the nations to spy on each other's citizens and then share the information.
So a little bit about how the Five Eyes works. Well, it's more or less straightforward. They collect intelligence, signal-to-signal human intelligence. They share that with other members under the Five Eye restriction. They make an agreement not to spy on each other's government officials, government entities, though not so much as far as each other's citizens. And the other advantage of some of this, how it works, is that if one part of the Five Eyes is engaged in particular spying, the others can deny that they're doing that spying, because, literally they are not, and still get the data. And so a lot of the things that came out that later were shown to be part of Five Eye programs, when they came out, there were some denials from members of the Five Eyes who weren't the ones who were part of that aspect of the collection.
In an earlier video, former NSA and CIA Director General Michael Hayden stated that the NSA never analyzes the data it collects from U.S. citizens. This would cross a legal line that the NSA does not wish to cross. However, through the Five Eyes agreement, the NSA could avoid such laws and allow other countries to do the dirty work for them before sharing the extracted information.
What is it that makes Five Eyes so durable? I mean, if this all started 70 years ago, why are we still talking about it in 2018? And it's fundamentally because the bedrock of Five Eyes are the common democratic values that are held by all 5 democracies that make up the group. So we shouldn't lose sight of where this started 70 years ago, and we shouldn't lose sight of what keeps us moving together in the same direction, values.
This alliance started during World War II, when the 5 countries began sharing information to better track and defeat the Axis of power. The Five Eyes alliance has continued to grow and evolve in the decades since, and today it is widely considered to be the most powerful intelligence sharing partnership in the world.
By doing this very publicly, it also normalizes mass surveillance. So that, there's a line of rhetoric that's sometimes used that because, the Five Eyes are Western democracies, that, they're the good guys and we shouldn't worry so much about misuse of these powers. But even if you buy into that, it normalizes mass surveillance for all the other countries in the world. So if you find a country that you would find authoritarian, that will not be respecting human rights principles, they can now say, hey, we're just doing what these other countries do. It is part of what every country does. And so breaking encryption, asking for the backdoors, making sure that we can get access to plain text, for example, is something that all the countries can ask for. And even if you feel that it's okay that Australia can get this information and then share it with the other Five Eye members, or maybe the 14 Eyes, maybe you don't feel so much that China should get this, that they should be able to say that all devices sold in China will have a backdoor that goes to the Chinese government, or maybe it's the Russian government that you're worried about. But in all these circumstances, it makes it too normal.
Congressmen and women attempted to ban TikTok because the Chinese government's intelligence agency controls it. All countries have similar agencies that capture data and run powerful algorithms with no regard to rights. Russia and China will try to influence Western social media by spreading disinformation and misinformation to promote discontent in the West. However, these strategies are not original. They got them from us. There is a cyber war going on, and it's impossible to know who is who and what opinions are genuine. XX Messenger, Network, Speakeasy, and CMix are tools that can provide protection by creating an invisible bubble of privacy around you and the people you trust. Privacy is important because it shapes who we are. Imagine if every thought or private conversation was publicized.
Look, if somebody goes over to ISIS and fights against the Iraqi government, by the way, that's not a crime to fight against the against the Iraqi government. It's insane. And then they want to come back? That is absolutely a sufficient basis for the NSA to know what that person's saying and to whom they're saying and what their plans are when they come back. Right. It would actually be a sufficient basis to prevent them from coming back.
Like they're doing in Britain. We're proposing to do. And so by keeping an eye on the people who go over there and come back, that's the right thing. It's spying on all the rest of us that have nothing to do with terror. That's the problem.
And that doesn't keep us safe. It just keeps us less free.
All right.
It is illegal to circumvent the law and spy on everyone. You're a law-abiding citizen, and they're not. U.S. citizens are protected from unlawful searches and seizures. They are breaking the law in the name of the law.
I mean, I was a political person, as was Stephen, as was John Howard and Lord Robertson. But all those officials who spend their larger part of their waking life, delving into information, they were a community of their own. They could tell you who in MI6 or who in the CIA was following a certain pattern of activity because they were always in contact. So the solidity and camaraderie of the officials working below the political level was possibly even stronger. They really did believe in what they were doing was so important to the West generally.
They have shared bases in Oman and in Australia. They get promoted. So if you're a GCHQ officer and you want to go and spend some time at NSA, your lunchroom pass gets you into the lunchroom at Fort Meade in the US. Spies that work for GCHQ and NSA have said the national product, the communications that we're intercepting, is often indistinguishable. They don't know what's come from GCHQ and what has come from the NSA. The cooperation between the countries, particularly in SIGINT, is so close that it becomes very difficult to know who is doing what. It's just organizational mess.
This international organization has the capability to know everything about everyone. It's a close-knit group with a strong sense of camaraderie and shared ideology.
Principally to talk about the subject, because when I was first introduced to Five Eyes probably about 30 years ago, you were sworn to this cone of silence. You couldn't even tell your wife that you had heard of this thing called Five Eyes. And when you went off to meet someone who came to your office and pulled down all the shades to have a chat with you, you began to realize, somehow you were getting information that other people weren't.
A secret organization with the same set of beliefs. I'm not oblivious to the fact that we need intelligence and espionage to protect ourselves. These organizations serve a purpose. But why are they storing the data of innocent people? They say that they only use this data to protect us. Take a look around. Examine some of the people who have benefited from international policies and some of the people who spoke out against the status quo. Consider the consequences. Do you believe that this data is only used for our protection, or is it leveraged in other ways to further an agenda unbeknownst to us?
Backdoor to collect data from data centers of these different companies when they could have gone through the front door. and the relationship is bad. It's really bad. What do you say to these executives? What can the U.S. government do today to begin to repair that breach of distrust?
Get over it, right?
Get over it. Is there anything more concretely that we can do?
No.
Because they're not over it.
No, and they shouldn't be over it because it's done great harm. And I get it. I mean, we talked a little bit before we came in here about what Google and Apple are doing with regard to unbreakable encryption, right? You know, the FBI is not going to be able to read Tony Soprano's cell phone unless they go to Tony and ask him for the key. I mean, that's essentially what they're going to do. Do I object to that as an intelligence professional? Yes. Okay. Do I understand that based upon Google and Apple's business model? Absolutely. Okay. So let's unpack some of the things you brought up about you guys are just like the Chinese. Actually, we're not. We're actually much better than they are. But we self-limit. I freely admit, NSA steals stuff. And we're really good at it. And we're better than the Chinese. But we steal stuff to keep you free and keep you safe. We do not steal stuff to make you rich. And there are 4 other countries I know of in the world who could say those last 2 sentences and have them be true. Everyone else steals for commercial advantage. And the distinguishing characteristic between ourselves and the Chinese is not that we conduct electronic surveillance, because we do. It's that we conduct electronic surveillance for far more narrow purposes than the Chinese do. And so that is an important distinction that should not be lost. And you're probably getting the message here that I'm saying we steal stuff through electronic espionage without apology. And I am. So that's one.
Power corrupts. And absolute power corrupts absolutely. The idea that the NSA and the Five Eyes are only using this data under certain circumstances, do you really believe that? These are agencies that are out in the open breaking and circumventing laws without consequences.
Incident in particular, how exactly did the U.S. government get this Bitcoin back?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's a very interesting topic. We, at Elliptic, we're in the business of tracking the flow of funds in the blockchain. And what we've seen here, unfortunately, is just another event in ransomware. And so at Elliptic, we've done some key work in order to label the addresses that were used by the dark side ransom team here on the Colonial Pipeline. This information that we were able to provide in our tools ultimately led to law enforcement to trace the funds in the Bitcoin blockchain and ultimately identify which wallets were used for the attack and the ransom payments.
In a ransomware attack, how common is it to get the money back, whether it's paid in cryptocurrency or not?
I would say it's definitely not frequent, and also it's very rarely publicly known. In fact, the payment of the ransoms themselves are very rarely publicly known. I think in this particular instance, some amazing work was done by the FBI and the Department of Justice, and they were able to effectively catch the Bitcoin as they were moving straight into a wallet for which they held the private keys. How they held those private keys is still unknown to this day. Whether or not we will find out is still to be seen.
Crypto uses public ledgers, so everything is out in the open. Warrants are unnecessary. With all transactions being public, anyone with one of your wallet addresses can access your entire history in the crypto world. The Five Eyes have the whole digital world replicated and distilled. I find it ironic that the crypto world fears Klaus Schwab's vision, not realizing his vision is already here. An enemy of the US held the Colonial Pipeline ransom, and within a week, the Bitcoin was recovered. Think about that.
Now, I ask you the question, if you got ejected out of the 3rd biggest country in the world, or if I denied you privileges to live in any of the 5 largest countries in the world, would your life go on? Probably. Now, what if you actually got canceled by Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Google tomorrow? The question is, would your life go on? Stop and think a little bit about what happens if they simply turned off your account, seized your photos, turned off your messages, took your documents. What if Microsoft just denied you access privileges? Could you run a business? Could you work?
Critics will tell me that I have nothing to hide and thus I am not doing anything wrong, which is a fair argument. However, as I've stated, it's not just the US and the Five Eyes that have intelligence programs. Every country does. China has the technology to compete in this area. There's a cyber war going on and you're the collateral damage. You have no idea who is who on social media because people can be whoever they want to be. Privacy is healthy. Imagine if all of your communications were public, or if all of your private conversations were out in the open for everyone to see. Mental and physical health would be at risk because you shape your personality with privacy. You are free to be who you want to be and where nobody is examining you.
The new NSA commander has gone a bit further, and he said, clearly, there are some nations that have been very vocal, very visible in their frustration and their unhappiness. But we have a level of capability and reach that few, if any, can replicate. The value that NSA provides is almost irreplaceable. They know that they're the big brother in the room. They know that they're the one pushing for mass surveillance in all these states around the world, forcing countries to weaken their domestic protections and creating this system where we're in a global race to the bottom. Where people are trying to hold them accountable, they're putting pressure. They're saying, no, you can't find out this information. And I say, this is what we now need to do. We need to expose these relationships. We need to shine a light on how these organizations work together in our courts and in our parliaments so that we can bring our intelligence agencies once and for all under the rule of law.
Although I am unable to change the world, I can take precautions for myself. The XX network is a protocol that was designed with privacy in mind. With centralized privacy solutions, you have to worry about whether there was a backroom deal with an intelligence agency, or if a warrant is served and they are forced to hand over this information. In other words, there would be a single point of failure. However, with a decentralized protocol that is quantum resistant and scalable, you wouldn't have to worry about these things. More complicated tools can be designed as this is a public utility. Unlike other privacy chains, the XX network is scalable and capable of handling a higher throughput. If you are a developer, there is a grant program to develop applications like voice over internet over the XX network or Twitter for the XX network.
But the thing that you can't control for is whether they have been themselves compromised by a third party, for example, the Five Eyes. So you have, Switzerland, and is it possible that the Five Eyes have done surveillance on Switzerland without the Swiss permission? It's certainly possible. I've not seen any information that has happened, but a lot of really interesting stuff happens in Switzerland. And they're extremely interested in the flow of money. Switzerland is well known for its banking system and its secrecy. A little bit less secret than it used to be, but nevertheless, that's one of their principles. So that is a bit of the risk. So, think of it sort of like a multi-pronged thing, that you need to have the law that says that you would be protected. You need to have a policy that makes that law actually effective, the country that abides by the rule of law. But you still need the third component, which is a technological protection, a system that you can trust, that even if somebody was trying to actively exploit it, they would be resistant to that thing. So hoping that they don't because they have the law and policy, but also in case that they do, or maybe a third party does, that you have that system and to have confidence in that system. And I think those systems still will exist, and they will continue to exist because you can develop an open source product, make it available, not go to these countries, and someone can look through the code and have at least a reasonable idea that there's no intentional backdoor, there's no intentional ghost user capability, that it has a system where if anybody's added to a conversation, you need to verify keys and go through a process. So the technological step, I think you need in addition to being comfortable with the nation state.
Banking is somewhat decentralized, meaning that if the Five Eyes wanted details of your bank account, they would need a warrant and then ask the bank for the records of the specific person.
And they're extremely interested in the flow of money.
And for Canada, some of our most important relationships in the world, not just with the United States, Britain, Australia, New Zealand. These are countries that sort of share, in my view, all of the critical elements of foreign policy: alignment on security matters, alignment on matters of prosperity and economics, and alignment on matters of values and democracy. But then with the Five Eyes, there's a fourth element, not critical, but exists, which is this kind of broader historical, cultural overlay and, long history of cultural cooperation and obviously action in international affairs and global conflict through a long period of time. So obviously...
Now that we have the big picture, think about this transition to a cashless society. The previous bull run was unprecedented. It became hip, it became glamorous, with celebrities shilling dog coins. Everybody went from thinking I'm a nerd and doomsayer to asking me how can they buy Shiba Inu. Crypto assets are ledgers that store all data on the chain and in the public domain. A blockchain is accessible data of every transaction. All they need to know at one point is who the wallet belongs to. Once they have this information, the whole digital history is revealed. This is the perfect technology for groups like the NSA and the Five Eyes. Life without a plan is a life without expectations. If you want to learn more about the XX network, go to hub.xx.network. Thanks everyone, I hope you enjoyed the show. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. If you enjoy work like this, please consider joining my Patreon.